Hi class, and welcome to the Virtual Worlds Day. Um, this is one of my favorite topics and where I do most of my research, so I'll try to keep it a little bit brief. There aren't that many slides. However, I'll be talking a little bit more in depth than probably normal. Okay, so this is T.L. Taylor. She is a sociologist. She teaches at MIT. Currently, her main focus in her research is live streaming and esports, which is kind of cool because she is female, and she has all sorts of fun stuff to say about how females are excluded and how she gets treated differently. She recently came to UWM and did a talk, and it was great. She's friends with my advisor, Dr. Malaby, so pretty cool. But she's also looks at the social aspects of play. When she started looking at World of Warcraft and how integral it was to the embodiment and bodilessness of the character and or the avatar and the player, and how that relationship worked as far as the power that it gave the player within the society. Anyway, okay, so her basic article, assemblage. She uses this term to understand the range of actors that make up a play moment. So she says interrelation is the technology and the user and their relationship. The specific interrelations and practice bring about the contextual nature of play. Artifacts that traverse multiple communities of practice can behold multiple, often contested meanings. So basically what she's saying here is that there's a connection between the technology and the gamers, or those that are playing the game, and the different pieces of both the physical technology as well as what's in the game have meanings that can be very different both within the game and outside of the game, both at the same time. She then talks about the autonomous agents, or the 41st member of a raid, and these are the add-ons or modifiers or mods that people tend to use. I say tend to, when raiding, which is 40 people, well, depending on the expansion within WoW, can be anywhere from 10 to 40 people. When she was doing it, it was 40 people who come together and kill bosses, big nasty guys. And these mods are required in order to get into the raid, because you're looking at different aspects, and it just helps to remind you not to stand in the fire and die, which is something that happens all the time. So even with these mods, people sometimes still do it. But she's saying that these mods are the 41st player because they are so integral to the running of a raid smoothly. So she says that these mods stand alongside the players, anchored to human actors in the chat channel. And she says this because there's pop-ups that happen throughout the raid that are done because of this mod gets activated. They do stand outside the social system in operation when not using a mod. That is very true. Most people are not invited to raids if they do not have these mods, and people start shouting at them, and it makes things go less smoothly, is what she's saying. But the mods can be unreliable at times. They can become desynchronous. So there is that as well, which also gives them more of a humanistic type aspect and feel, as they're not always right on schedule and computerized, I guess I would say. So they do help open up the productivity of the terrain for understanding our various field sites by researching these mods. As a research player, we also become configured by the technologies and practices. They shape our experiences of the space and our data as we embody ourselves digitally, participate in modding with our own UIs, user interfaces, inhabit specific server communities. We do not stand outside of it. This was on page 336. What she's basically saying there is that there's this connection to these mods as well as the game itself that helps us to create who we are within the game itself. So, okay, that is T.L. Taylor. She's pretty awesome. Okay, Thomas Malaby. This is my advisor. Oh, one of them. Okay, he does teach at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. He is Harvard educated. He tends to study the relationship between institutions, unpredictability, and technology, as well as games and game-like processes. He studies Second Life. That's one of his big things, but he also studied gambling in Greece. So, a Second Life, he says, in most cases takes the meaning of, is taken to mean real life. A value, furthermore, depends on its potential for circulation in social networks or material reward through actions. So he's basically trying to say in a lot of different words that there's the social capital as well as the actual capital that most people are thinking about. Social capital comes about when you have a good reputation. That's social capital. So he also says that these virtual worlds it's acceptable to call them worlds because they are constantly in flux. He points to an ever-increasing possibilities for action within them. The one thing that there are a couple concepts that are pretty important within this article, but one of them is when he talks about the magic circle. And he says that these video games are not magic circle. There is a distinction between both of the spaces, but that it's blurred. So they're semi-bound arenas, which means that you're never fully within a virtual world, and there's always that pullback to the physical world. So that's pretty important. And then he goes on to talk about capital, which is one of his big things. So capital is a resource for action. It's conceptual rather than empirically driven. Again, it's about your prestige and about your point of view. So the forms of capital are the product of human effort over time. Human capital is the first resource for people. Over time, it generates both the material, social, and cultural capital. Currency is collective trust and network finance in institutions. Social capital is special qualities of the reciprocity. Remember Moss's reciprocity. Moral relationship central to this phenomenon is time. Cultural capital, what is given cultural capital finds to me what is found to be meaningful and important. And then it says, avatars may not only represent a user in the world to others or self or herself, it can also become an object of cultural capital, an object that uniquely bears a history with specific experience, objects, and credentials. This is kind of important because your avatar does tend to delineate who you are within the culture or this virtual society. And it definitely has specific objects, experiences, and the credentials come about. A good example of that would be the achievement systems within World of Warcraft. So there's that. Artifacts are objectified, their value from the status as repositories of cultural capital. So this is basically saying that different artifacts show the cultural capital that they represent. They're basically symbols, is what he's saying. And it tries how human actors move within and among different domains of all kinds, converting different forms of capital into one another. So basically what he's saying here is that one form of capital can help you to achieve other forms, and they can be traded. So, okay, well, I know we didn't technically read anything about Tom Bolestorff, but he is extraordinarily important in digital anthropology, and I would be remiss if I didn't tell you at least a little bit about him and his work. And so he works at the University of California, Irvine. He researches so many different things: sexuality, globalization, digital anthropology, Southeast Asia, HIV, AIDS, and linguistics. He is Harvard educated. His YouTube video, I don't know. Let's see if I can have you guys watch this. See, I don't think I can and still record. So you guys will have to watch it on your own. So I'll put the link. Not a big deal. But anyway, he researches Second Life and he talks about embodiment. And it's pretty cool, some of the things that he says as far as embodiment goes. One of the things that he says is that the virtual world has always really been embodied, because there's he gives two very good examples in two different areas. One is when he's talking about the old phone board switches and how they would plug them in and take them out depending on where the caller wanted to go. He said that a lot of the times there were like young boys who would go and play with them and connect them differently just to be little rascals. But there's also the embodiment. When a virtual reality first came into being, there were two people on either end of this virtual computer, and they just had their hands virtually mapped. And one of the guys went and virtually touched the hand of another guy, and the other guy kind of pulled back. Even though, because of course this was during the 90s, so 80s, 90s, so a man touching another man was considered gay, and that was considered bad. So this guy pulling back his virtual hand because another man's virtual hand touched his kind of shows the embodiment that happens virtually. It's, even though 3D and computer avatars are slightly different, it really does show that the virtual portrayal of a person embodied really does have a huge impact on the person as well as the digital avatar. So I definitely want you guys to watch this YouTube video. If you have any questions, please let me know.